I wanted to hit record. So thank you, folks. We are recording. We are live, and it is our boohoo. It's our final session together. I'm going to put up the screen and these things properly in a moment. It always brings me to a moment of remorse when we're wrapping up our sessions. But it is brilliant to have everybody back together again. Thanks, Bob, and welcome to our final session this evening. I did these little kind of just check-ins at the 18th of February. We wanted to see how everyone was doing on, being fit to leave digital and AI. And we were kind of tilting more to the left. We checked in on the 11th of April, and we were, or sorry, we were to the right. We were on the in February. We were to the right, not the left. Forgive me. I've done it the wrong way around, obviously. But we through halfway through the program, we were kind of moving more towards the middle, and I've just did my little check there. And we are scoring around a 50-50 mark at the moment. So that seems kind of nice and pleasing. I know we haven't captured everybody. So for those of you who've been watching and not attending live, hopefully and hopefully definitely everybody who is here live and has been part of kind of capturing the journey as we've gone along, hopefully you're feeling and seeing that we are moving in the right direction. So brilliant to have us back. As we say, this is the final session that we have of 8, and it's going to focus in on digital risk. But I'll do my usual, do a couple of intro things. We've shared the slides already. I will update the final slides after this evening's session because probably one or two things I put in since I originally updated them. And we'll obviously upload the recording. So we'll do a little bit of starter stuff. We'll do some risk. Managing risk more broadly, and then thinking about managing risk in the digital environment. And then I'll definitely leave a little bit of time for us this evening to just check in on assignment 2, given it's the last time we'll be together. Although delighted if I can always to reach out and pick anybody up offline, online, offline, if you know what I mean. Always delighted to do that. But hopefully, have you comfortable enough now on those assignments as I gave to you last Saturday when we were together on the 25th of April. Really, really, really impressed with the detail that came through. Sorry, that was me trying to get to the waiting room to let some folks in. So as I try and do that, bear with me. Okay, you're gonna have to wait for a second. There's some people in the waiting room, and I haven't been able to let them in yet because it hides my participants. There we go. Got everybody now. Okay, sorry for bumbling around there. So what was I saying? Yes, we did on the Saturday the 25th, did a little bit on the assignment, but definitely giving you your feedback. You're all doing tremendous. Hopefully the specific feedback I've given you in written form and what I gave you in session on the 25th, which I think it was when I covered it, is getting you comfortable. And as I say, happy for people to reach out online and catch up with me. Okay, so today we are going to focus in on risk. Just a little titter. I was away for the last couple of days, literally just plugged in about an hour ago. I was down in Spain just taking a little bit of R and R, which was lovely. But I did pick up this little mail when I was away. I mean, I was just delighted that Jerome Powell, chairman of the Fed, took the time out of his busy diary to send me an email. It did indeed sit in my junk email. I'm sure you're getting these and seeing these all the time, but it's, oh my God, I can't believe we're still getting them. And it's like, oh my God, I can't believe we're still getting these. It is just tremendous. So one thing we'll definitely focus in on is how digital can manifest in such ways. But we won't go down, obviously, to this level of detail. We're going to keep it kind of at a strategic level as we've been trying to keep all the content heretofore. And as I say, my intention today is to just give you a kind of a broad perspective of how to think about and actually reference to a number of enterprise grade frameworks for managing risks. And then I'm going to call out my observations of what I see is the kind of the threat landscape to think about as a digital leader. So that's where I'm going to focus. So up from this level, and kind of more at the strategy level. So I'm going to get on with doing that now. While I am, will you please take a note if there's anything you want us to just spend any few minutes on? Put it in the chat, and I'm happy to take a little last chance to check in this evening because it's our final session. Okay, so if there's anything you want to check in on, let me know before we wrap the ceiling. So look, a couple of things in a rolling reportage. Actually, I wanted to close the loop because on Saturday the 25th, I we wrapped up a little earlier because I had fully intended to share with you Aidan McCullen on video, because he joined us a couple of years ago. He doesn't come for free, so he doesn't come for free every year for me. He's a fantastic speaker and writer, and we recorded Aidan, and I've played it back the last couple of sessions I've had with classes. But lo and behold, and Bob, thank you, you brought my notice to it. The link wasn't working. It did work in January when I upgraded all the materials and so on and so forth, or whenever I did it. I think it was in January or February, maybe. But in the meantime, the link isn't working, and I got in touch with the IOB after that session, and their YouTube T's and C's changed, and anything over 13 months has been wiped. So I don't have access to it. So I did go mooching when I was away, because I only found out when I was traveling on Wednesday. The IOB came back to me, and what I've done is I asked them to share back with you via email, which I think Lorraine Duane has, this updated link that's in the bottom of this slide. And it is Aidan being interviewed, probably covering, 70-80% of what he covered with us when he was live online. Aidan knows the financial services industry, knows Irish industry, knows transformation inside out, and he shared online with us, but online in this interview that he's done. It's about an hour, but it's worth listening to. If you haven't heard Aidan before, I would encourage you to go and have a listen to that. So sorry about that link not working. My apologies. I thought it was. I wouldn't put it out there if I thought it was, if I knew it wasn't. But there's an updated link there worth having a look at that as well. And look, more broadly, Aidan runs the innovation show every week. He brings, a kind of an author of note with their latest thinking and writing, and he interviews them. And it's really a wonderful kind of once a week opportunity to listen in to a real kind of tapestry of kind of world leadership on innovation and transformation. So check him out if you haven't already. Hopefully, you'll find he's useful. I read a couple of years ago this fantastic book. This is how they tell me the world ends. It's from Nicole Pelroth, I think, or Perlroth. I could never properly pronounce that, but it's an intriguing and fascinating glimpse into the cyber community, the cyber world, and the cut and thrust, the depth of the significance and the sophistication of cyber. I've done a little kind of summary here. You can do your own large language model, ask for a summary of the book, go into Notebook or go to Claude or GPT, whatever you use. I mean, get as long or short of a summary, but it is just phenomenal. What they call these 0-day bugs that are kind of running in our systems all the time, and it ignited again in me that I'm dealing with a CEO at the moment, a very large software organization, and they had a bug sit in their systems, and they provide software to the financial services world. Oh my God. And they're living through 60 days now of a 0-day threat, basically a corporate digital hostage situation. And it's just incredible how it chews up the time, energy, the focus, and creates stress in the system, and slows them down from progressing. Impacts all their clients because they're a B2B business, and just shows even, and this is a really credible, strong organization, digital leaders, I would say, but even so, they've had their attack surface breached. So this is something we should all be aware of, particularly in digital leadership. The kind of the threat of cyber, and it's lurking and bubbling and boiling away all the time, unfortunately. And it's something we don't talk about enough. So we're going to talk a little bit about that this evening. But that's a wonderful book if you do get a chance to read it. A couple of last things just to mention. I picked this article up a couple of years ago after I wrote this program, and practically the whole program is summarized in about a seven-page article from this gentleman, Nima Torabi. But it's a wonderful article, Strategic Framework for Successful Digital Transformation. So if you're kind of at the end of the program, or if you wanted to do a little bit of recap in 3 months' time, that's just one of the models out of it. I won't jump into that. But if you do want to kind of read an article that brings most of what we've talked actually in this module, the 8 sessions that we've done together, fair play to Nima. I reached out to him a couple of years ago to say thank you. He did a wonderful job, and politely came back. But it is a really good article if you want to read it. A more recent one I read just at the weekend, as I was traveling back from Spain, is the psychological cost of adopting AI. Guy called Guy Champness did an analysis of about 1,200 organizations and users about what's getting in the way of stopping organizations adopt AI, because the 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 componentry to technology is good. The data is often the challenge. The integration is, as I was talking to maybe one person on the call earlier on, is really, really a challenge. So getting all the data, getting it integrated, it, surfacing it, and letting AI at it. The latter bit is the easier bit. The former bit is a really tough bit. But so is adoption in the business. And we're starting to see some of these studies come out now. And these are all risks, by the way, and all of these kind of themes I'm sharing with you. And because the risk of not being able to use and adopt, or the risk of overusing and over adoption of AI, are really the two kind of, sides of the bell bar, those big weights that are kind of, that organizations are struggling with. Some people are overutilizing, some people are underutilizing. It's to get the sweet spot in the middle. And it's a really good article if you get a chance to have a read of. And it talks about accountability, it talks about trust, it talks about caution on one side, and then it talks about, over reliance on the other side. And it actually does go nicely into giving some tips and hints, and it uses examples from ING and Microsoft, two organizations I know with. And so they talk about the mass programs that Microsoft do, or it talks about the kind of the soft encouragement and almost the coaching style that ING use. They're both clients I work with, and I've seen them use them, and I'm aware of them. And they're really good tips for how to help people, take the leap, because there's lots of people not taking the leap because they're afraid of AI diminishing their credibility. And it's really interesting in the article. They say that actually older people are more likely to adopt AI because they've already, affirmed, or they've kind of established their role in the world, so their credibility is less dilutable. Whereas younger people actually it's starting to show now, are maybe most afraid of adopting AI because they have yet to build their credibility, and they're worried that AI will show up their lack of credibility. It's really interesting. It's definitely worth a read if you get a chance. And it talks about, yeah, you got to, redesign workflows for sure, but it talks a lot of the soft nature of building confidence, building judgment, and creating clarity on, to what degree we should leverage and hold AI accountable, which talks to a lot of the ethical stuff as well. So worth a read on that. And the final one I'll mention to you, again, picked this up last week. It's from the NESC. So this is the Irish and kind of National Economic, I think it's social research group, and it's a chunky report, but an 84-page report on how Ireland. It talks about a nation, right? But it's for Ireland and how Ireland should think about really instilling AI as a tool of national importance and significance. But it's really nice. It goes through the kind of the history and evolution of AI. It gives a global perspective on AI adoption, and it kind of brings in kind of this whole kind of view of building maturity. It talks a lot about AI fluency, AI literacy, and so on and so forth. But it's go away. I'd do a large language summary of it. But it's a nice report actually, and it really is the one-stop shop on AI. Again, I read it on my trips and thought it was a really good resource to share with you. So I know I give you more than enough reading and reading in advance, but there's a little bit of extra stuff there, folks. I'll just leave with you as we are signing off together. Right. Everybody okay with me before I kind of move on and jump into some content? Yeah, all good. We have a good gang in this evening, so thank you very much. If there's any questions, just pop them in the chat. Otherwise, I'll keep rattling away here. I'm going to incorporate most of the reading that I would have shared in the study guide. But the only one I'm going to call out is this. It was a really good McKinsey article. Um, 5 or 6 years ago. And a lot of this stuff was generated a couple of years ago because the world was mature then, as it is now. We're learning a new transformation now, as an AI transformation, but more broadly, transformation of business on digital is more applicable, as we know from our 360 to all parts of business, and so is AI, but it's a subset of the broader digital transformation. So that's why some of my articles are a little bit older because they kind of they're more broad and less narrow. All the stuff now is very narrow in AI. It's much broader back then, but it's recent enough to include AI. So that's why, if you're ever wondering why my articles are kind of that vintage, this is a really good article on transforming risk, efficiency, and effectiveness. And it does have a nice little section at the end which talks about how digital and then AI and machine learning and deep learning and so on has such an important role to play in supporting risk management. But it is an article on risk management transformation with a kind of an integrated digital perspective, but not solely a digital perspective. As you go down through the article, you can jump off into digital risk management, which is nice. But I think it's very cleverly put together, and it's for me, it's a very robust perspective into how in a world which is moving faster and is definitely more sophisticated and therefore more complex as a consequence. Where can organizations and how can organizations think about making risk an implicit muscle? Really what's at the heart of the and they really talk about, to make it an implicit muscle, you've got to have layers in the organization responsible for first, second and third line risk. And some organizations just aren't as mature as they should be on knowing who should do what, and identifying gaps and overlaps. And that's the kind of talks to the schema on the top right. So it talks about how mature organizations really structure themselves and imbue and embed risk management as a muscle, and why is that important? I mean, for me, and we'll cover this in the slides in a couple of minutes. I mean, at its essence, strategy is about the pursuit of big ambitions while accepting the risk of doing so, right? So this whole idea of risk assessment and pursuit of ambition. I mean, in the middle, anything we ever want to do, folks, in our personal capacity and our business capacity, if you have an ambition, walking out the door, launching a new product, whatever it is, as small and as big as it is, there's a risk, and the risk is implicit. And what we need to do is understand what is the implicit risk, understand to what degree we're willing to accept that risk, to what degree we can mitigate that risk, and to what degree we can observe, monitor, and respond to either the risk emerging or the risk depleting, or identifying how we can be smarter with mitigating risk, often using digital and AI. I mean, risk management, that's its very essence. Loads of risk folk with us. I know you all have risk as part of your worlds, but it is really important in this kind of last session that we get to, that we're kind of looking back at everything we've learned through the lens of risk. And this article just talks about the modern risk management kind of ethos. It does jump down into lovely sections. As I say, there's a nice one on digital. There's one on, how does an organization in a world that's getting more complex, how do you make sure that your risk management kind of manuals, which are basically your processes, right? How you need to simplify those in a world that's becoming more complex. It really talks to the kind of the second capability we talk to, which is about efficiency and simplification. So a really important part for that. And it through the article you see it kind of focuses in on how can we identify processes where we can automate them, i.e., digitalize them or put AI in as the mechanism to accentuate them. And of course, it looks at efficiency and effectiveness, but it also looks at feasibility. It's kind of a nice three-dimensional way. And through the whole article, it is anchored in financial services. So, for a really broad perspective on financial services, risk management, how it should look today, and where and how and why we should deploy digital and AI to support us in that. It is a nice read, and it's a nice complement to the content. Sorry, that I'm going to try and run through with you now, and it kind of that starts for me with I just think more and more in the world we're bestowed, if I haven't said that correctly, with these wonderful tools of digital and AI. And let's start with this notion that with great power, with that great capability comes great responsibility. Because the more we do it and the quicker we look to deploy it, because it's new and because we're accelerating utilization, adoption, and deployment, that should raise our risk spidey senses, if you want to call it that. But it definitely necessitates us to be more observant, more kind of categorically uh, not just aware, but adopting the ability to engineer risk management within everything that we're doing when it's new and when the pace is accelerating. I mean, that again for me is why this is just so important. So, with this new responsibility, because it's a new this new power, we have these new responsibilities because the prowess and the pace is just moving at such a piece. You'll have seen, hopefully, if you've read the slides beforehand, I talk about the sword of Damocles, a story from the ancients, King Dionysus. He sits on his throne, and above his throne hangs a sword, and it's held by a single horse's tail hair. And Damocles, as one of his loyal subjects, begged and begged to beg the king. He wanted to sit on the throne and feel the power. But of course, as soon as he sat on the throne and felt the power of the kingdom and ruling the kingdom, that great responsibility, he also felt the kind of the presence of the sword. And eventually, not eventually, sorry, very quickly, he realized that with that great responsibility, great power, sorry, came the responsibility. And it's kind of just a way for me to kind of really kind of to sum up that, we definitely need to be aware of the Jerome Powell, the threats from the outside. But we also need to be very aware of the power that we have now on the inside and how we manifest that on the outside. So there's an outside in and an inside out perspective, I think, to risk management that we need to be very aware of. There are dark forces. There is an increasing community of threat actors, bad actors, who are using cyber and the latest AI technologies now. And, a lot of us are watching quantum as the kind of the next era of computing. beyond binary code systems. To look at the WEF and look to most of the big advisors, they're saying, the most important thing that organizations do right now is get ahead of quantum, because the sophistication of which is basically all about the pace and the breadth of calculation on quantum chips is just, a quantum era different than binary. That it could unlock every single piece of encryption that we have in the world today. So, and AI is if you couple AI with quantum computing, they're dangerous kind of bedfellows. So we need to be on cyber specifically and on cyber prevention, but there is a much more broader level of risk management required. And let's jump into that a little bit. On the left-hand side, and I'm going to link it. Every temple needs formidable foundations. I mean, for me, we need to think about, of course, the technology risk spectrum. So that's about, the architecture and the strategy, the ability of a system to deliver strategic outcomes. We touched on that in our technology evening 2 sessions ago, and all the principles that I shared with you about, being reliable, elastic, componentized, etc., looking at affordability and so on and so forth, all really critical. Um, so, with the amount of money now we invest in data and technologies, we have to be, big risk is that we're using that widely and that we're constructing it in a way that will give us longevity and freedom and flexibility. Business continuity is because, we're just so dependent now on technologies, on digital and AI, that a greater and greater degree of reliance now on core processing is keeping the doors open. So, so disaster recovery, and just general business continuity management, from somebody who ran a lot of digital systems. When we're thinking about national payment infrastructures, the likes of the big retail banks or even in the big global banks, the inability to process not just payments at the counter from glitches, but whole payrolls, social welfare runs, all these kind of things. I mean, it's phenomenal how systemically important financial services is in moving money around the world. And money's not everything, but it's up there with oxygen and definitely makes the world go round. So the dependence we have on technology now to enable our payment systems, but of course that links back, to the cloud. And I mean, probably the bigger risk is actually in cloud performance and cloud continuity. And I work with cloud providers, and I mean they live and breathe availability, because it is their single core metric. Because it's not just about keeping payment systems up and running, but it's about keeping hospitals up and running. It's about keeping airlines and aviation traffic management up and running, like real do or die stuff. So we are so dependent on technology in these days, both in our industry and just more broadly in the world, that area of business continuity is critical. And because we've digitalized, and digitally transformed, so much of the processes and the services and the way we go around the world right now, we share our data amidst all of that. So data assurance is a fundamental component of technology risk. So managing the quality, accuracy, and coherence of data. Now, I'm sure you're looking down through the rest of the slides. Cyber, I've mentioned. Change management, we've talked about it somewhat, but because of this pace on this adoption of new technologies, the pace of change, the sophistication, and the complexity that's putting in technology systems now, there's a greater and greater and a bigger degree of necessity for thoughtful change management. And it's a bit like the AI psychology article I referenced a little while ago. What's critical is that we know how to strike the balance and navigate safe, ethical adoption that in such a way that it ensures longevity. And that's really at the heart of much of the not just the technology risk, but indeed all of the risk. But change management through our technology change cycles, absolutely critical for both the run and the immediate impact, but also for this idea of building thoughtful and preservable and sustainable technology systems and data, data sources and data foundations that help us use those digital systems to deliver those services and the value that we want, and more, legal and risk requirements, coming around all this. You've got DORA, you have GDPR, which we're all very aware of now, et cetera, et cetera. There's increasingly regulation coming at us because of all the necessity that I've already talked about. And the final is really important because we are now using more and more software solutions. So our dependency on vendors who sell them to us and the partners that integrate them with us, including cloud, right to the core, data and infrastructure foundations that are just virtualized, right through all the technology systems, and looking through the lens of business continuity, data assurance, cyber, change management, through not just our own proprietary technology, people and systems, but right down and out through vendors and into partners, is becoming more complex, and therefore there's a greater need to manage this. Now, good news is the risk community are fantastic because they have developed and shared with the world in open source thinking with this kind of open mindset. Um, yeah, fantastic frameworks that help us kind of break this down and make sure that we can manage it. One of those is from the NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technologies, US, Department of Commerce. They've a thing called the RMF and the Risk Management Framework. And it's like, we won't go into it, we don't have time to go into it in detail here, but if you want to do a double click on how you need to look into risk management frameworks around information security, into privacy programs, because they're different. Information security is about how you hold your information and how you make sure it's robust and how you stop things like unauthorized access. And then privacy is about much more around how you leverage that information and how you don't make the wrong decisions with it, but using it in the wrong way, back to the client or to other clients, etc., etc. So it's a really nice kind of model. So if you want to double click on it, double click on it. But again, we're keeping ourselves at a strategic level. So these are the kind of the strategic technology risks I would be expecting, a digital leader in an organization to have a handle on, and using something like the NIST risk management framework. Lots of big organizations have their own risk frameworks, and but a lot of them actually have been gestated from the likes of the RMF from NIST. So it is a good place to go for reference if you want to do so. Kind of double clicking in. Now, I'm not going to get into this but in a whole lot of detail, but there's a couple of slides that I included in the pack because I just believe that we need to be paying more attention to cyber. And the cyber threats. It's not a side of desk thing. It's not for the cyber team. It's for everybody. It's a table stake. Because the more and more we use digital and AI, the more what they call the attack surface grows. And that's basically around the more systems we use, the more data we have, the more we deploy digital and AI products into the world. That just increases the way the kind of the what they call the surface, the way that we can, our core systems, the data in our systems, or we as business people can be held to ransom for the data in our systems and its privacy and so on and so forth. And it links back to that book I mentioned earlier on, and tell me this is how they rule the world. So I would really encourage you. I've all too often seen, as I think I make the point down at the bottom of this slide, or if not another one. I've seen too many organizations that leave cyber to the cyber folks. Cyber is everybody. In fact, most vulnerabilities are exposed through human behavioral kind of lack of knowledge or through tactics that are designed to make people circumvent the system level kind of barriers that technologists and cyber specialists put in place. So often the threat is actually much more a human threat rather than a system threat because systems rely on humans and we're not because we're not coded. It's easier behaviorally to trick us. So really very important that we're making the point about, really understanding what is cyber, how it can present itself, how it's observed, and how to build resilience. And the Deloitte Cyber Defense Framework, there's loads of them out there, right? But it's just a nice, easy one. And it looks at, from the bottom, knowing, where your digital assets are, your AI assets, what services and processes you run, what data you have, who's using them in terms of employees and contracts. You see the gray bar on the bottom. And then it's about, there's three pillars of securing your data and your technology environment. It's about building vigilance, so monitoring to identify threat intelligence, and ultimately then resilience comes from constant vigilance and constant re-securitization of capabilities. They should have drawn it in a circle because it'd be easier to explain then or visualize, but it's three nice pillars and it's a clever way to think about it. So it's about securing your surface and everything behind it from attack and infiltration. It's about putting systems of vigilance around it, and then it's about continuous learning and to continue to build resilience. And you need to look right through the value chain, and it's all about protecting business value. So it's a nice framework to kind of just help give people a mental model around it. And then on the right-hand side, again, NIST, they have a cyber security framework, all about how do you identify, protect, detect, respond, and discover, rediscover, or recover. And that's up there, just playbooks, right? And you can really, if you want to nerd out, you can go down into Meter Attack. And it's a globally accessible knowledge base. This is slide shots from a couple of years ago, but it constantly gets upgraded, and they offer up to the world ways to know you've been exposed and ways to respond to that exposure. Things, the basically indicators called indicators of compromise or IOCs, which help you understand how you're being exposed. And then they deal with, serve up, depending on how you've been exposed, what are the tactics that you should be using, that bad actors are using, and therefore, you can identify, isolate, and be able to counteract against. And it's constantly updating it. And as I say, digital teams, I'm always agitating at them to say, like, have we got a handle on your surface and all the assets, the data, and the people sitting behind it? Because if you get exposed, unfortunately, I've had the personal experience of getting exposed in an enterprise setting on this stuff. Never mind, and we all probably got exposed in some degree. I probably all had a card cancelled or something along the way, right? But in an enterprise where you're going to have to go onto the radio and explain why your services aren't running anymore, which would be kind of worst case scenario. Being ahead of that is about being aware of the risk, and cyber risk is going to increasingly become more challenging. Do a lot of work with boards. I'm lecturing tomorrow morning with the Institute of Directors on digital and AI, running a masterclass, and we will be talking about cyber because one of the one, two, or three priority thing in a board's mind is, are we safe from a cyber perspective? Because it's probably least thought and most exposing. So again, as digital and AI leaders, I encourage you to look into that. But if we bring ourselves right back up out of that, okay? So there's technology risk. There's very definitely cyber risk. How do we manage risk? I mean, this is going to be a bit of the 101, but it's the simplest and the most trodden ground is the most fertile and firm all at the same time. Because risk management comes down to asking ourselves and understanding how could risks emerge? How would we recognize it? How vulnerable are we if it does emerge? And what's the risk that we actually could potentially take? So look, these are samples that I've shared with you on screen and in your packs, and take it from an end user perspective. What risk could emerge? Back to that business continuity point. If our systems are down and people can't use them, that's a risk that could emerge. But what could result from that? So how would we recognize it? Well, we'll get complaints probably in social media because people are trying to use your app and saying, look, an app isn't working again, whatever's going on, right? Or people are saying I didn't get paid last night, or that trade didn't go through, or whatever it is. I'm giving all financial services kind of risks here now. So that's how you'll know what's going on because you'll start, either your own systems will tell you, or oftentimes it's the outside world, social media will actually be telling you what's going on. But risk management, so that's risk. They're the risk, but risk management are, do we know how well or how safe and secure and tight from a cyber perspective our systems are. So are we evaluating them against some sort of kind of framework or diagnostic, right? And the FERPS, I would have used FERPS in the technology evening as just a good way to look at system currency. So, and it includes risk management and cyber and so on. And having SLAs and having a way to diagnose, not post the matter, but pre the matter, how fit our systems are. And that's just a kind of a system level. I mean, we of course need to talk about the human aspect, and we'll come to that. And then understanding what are the effects of that risk? So it could be reputational, it could be loss of customers, it could be complaints, it could be redress, it could be, as it often is, kind of censure, or could actually be, what was I going to say? It could be when you have to pay money to the financial to the regulator. Forgive me, I can't remember the word. It's my long COVID again. And where you're not just going to have to make redress to the customers, but you're going to end up paying money. So it could be financial loss. So the outcome or the effects could be financial, could be non-financial, could be brand. It could be employee, organizations, teams, their folks, if they don't see risk, managed progressively and correctly, especially as we kind of accelerate into this digital world, folks may not want to come and work with you. Folks may leave you, and they're probably the smarter folks. So it can be equally as corrosive on the inside as it can be to your balance sheet and to your financials as it also can be on the outside. I'm not going to go through all of these, and I'm going to skip through a couple of slides. But one I do want to get to is, this is the quintessential risk calibration way. So again, we take that type of risk, could be customer experience delivery, the description of the risk, right? So similar to the one I've just talked about, that latency, intermittent system performance. And then, really it's about understanding the probability of that risk emerging and the impact of that risk if it does emerge. So you're kind of pulling them onto this probability impact. And sometimes you see them in grids. I haven't got one here, but often you'll see them in probability on the y-axis, impact on the x-axis. And then if you start to identify your most corrosive and most risk you need to be most attentive to. They usually sit in the top right, but they're the ones that are high probability and high impact. We sometimes just do them in terms of probability and impact here. I've just given an idea about putting a quantum on impact. Maybe if it's about cost, what degree of customer balances could you use, or what percentage of cross sale targets might become unrealizable. Sometimes in the reputational damage one, you talk to the brand folks, and they'll say, well, we spent 5 million building up the brand of this new product or this new division or whatever it is over the last couple of years, and they're able to actually start quantifying the impact of risk. The more quantifiable you make it, the more real you make it, and the better that will become for the organization to say, okay, let's take this serious. What's the risk response strategy? And who owns that? Sometimes you also see a treated risk column. So you have the untreated risk, which is what's the probability of impact of that happening, what's the mitigation or the risk response, and then you see what's the post risk that we would be left with. What's called the residual risk. It's not on this, but if you're really going to get deep into risk management, that's typically what you would see. And then an organization will have to be either willing to accept that risk, which sets their risk appetite. And then, they sometimes have a tolerance behind, sometimes they know that the risk at certain times may increase. So for instance, customer experience delivery on what's that big day, the big Friday, Amazon's big Friday, where where the e-commerce sales bulge by 20%. So if payment systems go down on the Christmas Eve, whatever it is, right? Big days of spending, you might have a tolerance for to say, well, look, we know it's going to increase on that day, and we're willing to run that risk. But having that out loud conversation is the most important part. And all these grids do is support an organization having a conversation with itself around, do we know where risk is sits? We know where it's kind of latently bubbling away right now. Do we know what's the probability of it actually crystallizing into an event? What the impact degree of that event would be, how we should minimize that, eradicate it if we can, but a lot of the time it's about mitigation and minimizing. And are we happy then to sit with the post mitigated risk? And then that gives you your framework for actually evaluating risk as you go along. Now, if you really want to dive into enterprise risk management, there is you can get into the COSO, enterprise risk management, or ERM. I'll put some slides of that into your pack, and also talked a little bit about this idea of risk appetite and tracking. Um, and I kind of just wanted to close the loop on the importance of risk management by saying that it's not a one-off event. Boards that I sit on, teams that I work with, we persistently have structured conversations. At a board, it could be monthly. An executive team, it could be monthly. At a board, it could be quarterly, whatever the frequency is. But we're persistently having a conversation around, have we identified the risks? Are we understanding the probabilities and impacts of these risks? Are we understanding our mitigations, and are we happy with our with the risk appetite that we are therefore accepting? Because understanding your risk appetite is part of strategy. Because, as I said at the top, strategy is what ambition are we pursuing, at what risk we're going to take. And it's at your mitigated risk, when you identify your risk appetite, that you're saying we're happy to pursue that new product, that new market, that new AI solution, that new digital experience, on the basis that this is the risk that we're carrying after we mitigate the risk. That's the strategic conversation. We don't have enough of those in organizations. Digital leaders, in my mind, definitely need to be driving and purporting that level. Now, I've been yapping away for a little while, so I should check in and see how you're all doing, see if there's any questions. I'll check in on the chat. Don't see anything coming through in the chat. Anything? Black Friday. Thank you, Bob. Yeah. A few things escaped me this evening. Getting some thumbs up there as we're going along. Okay, great. And then just the guidelines, ISO. All of your organizations, I'm sure, ISO certified. On risk management. Or perhaps are using, kind of frameworks like next generation risk appetite management's on the left. It's a little bit more, and there's a link you can go and read the reports and so on and so forth. Or, at an enterprise level, you're using COSO, ERM, or whatever it is. And they're pretty responsive, kind of policy makers or guiders, as I might term the likes of COSO and NIST and so on, because they update their models and their frameworks as they go along. In 2022, they upgraded ERM for kind of digital and agile worlds because they're kind of saying that, the old way of managing risk at an enterprise level needs to evolve because, we've gone from waterfall to agile. And what does that mean? Basically means that we're now using digital and AI to improve or introduce products and services and experience at a much faster rate. Number one, and the second thing is, ultimately, it's the philosophy is that you want to create the increase the velocity and the pace of change. You've got to kind of devolve authority and decision making down into the organization because the same number of people at the top can't make more decisions more quickly. So, devolving decision making and to accelerate change is the kind of creates a quantum of new risk. And that's ultimately why at the very top I said it's about, with accelerating, prowess, we're creating this new complexity. That's why risk management is more important today than it needed to be in the past. I think there's a couple of digital kind of observations, what I call hard risk. I'm going to show you some soft ones in a second, but some kind of observations of behind COSO and behind NIST. What I observe, when I work with digital teams or when I ran digital teams or when I go and visit digital teams now. There's kind of maybe some unwritten risk dimensions, but they're really important to look out for because they're not generally in the global frameworks, and they're around code and file sharing. How many data sets and how much code gets snipped and shared and reused around an organization without the proper controls and filters and even audit trails. And I think, there's some, dimensions, and I've also kind of put in the kind of the impact zone here, and you'll pick them up as I'm talking to them. So, just file and code sharing, shadow IT. This whole idea of, uh, business people outside of, fully, resourced and monitored and risk managed technical architects. How many people are bringing in software as a service? GPT, Claude, it's why organizations now are saying, no, you're not allowed to use it on your work PC. That's too binary. We should be enabling people to figure out what it can do and the risks within it and help our people, where we can make sure they're using the right data in it and learning to, understand, the accuracy of the outputs. That's the kind of risk kind of management philosophy I believe that we should have. But I understand, and at scale, organizations, particularly when it's new and when they're trying to catch up. To be honest, we do have these kind of binary lockdowns. But it doesn't work. I don't know many teams I've come across where, and I've done audits with organizations where we've had to have amnesties with teams to kind of out your systems. Do you know what I mean? Because people are just, they're on local with local permissions, maybe on secondary lap, all kinds of funny stuff going on where people are seeing the opportunity of using digital and AI, but because of lockdowns and perimeter restrictions, they're kind of hacking their way through it. Something to be really, really, really careful of. There's obviously there's regulatory, there's privacy, there's all those kind of things, there's ethical concerns, but very importantly, I have come across circumstances where people trying to do the right thing have integrated, external software into workflows, and it's the weakest link syndrome where critical services brought down by untested and unmanaged software can be just detrimental, ultimately for the customer, yes, but for the brand, the business, the team, and unfortunately, I've seen it for the individual. So, as a digital leader, we need to be really, really observant of, let's not have the need for an amnesty. At least let's try and stay ahead or if we do know that we're using these systems, that we're assessing the threat or we're risk managing the way through it, and we're trying to get shadow IT out and into the sunlight where it can be seen and where it can stand up to its full height in a properly protected environment. I'm sure you might have read the slides before. You can see the rest as I'm going through bias. We'll have talked about before with AI skills. I mean, just more of this technology that's coming and the different ways that we're using it now with agile and so on and so forth. Um, skills and AI hugely important now. So managing the quotient and managing the skills base, look, absolutely critical. And as we're automating things, it's not to have, unseen risks. So often as we're, digitizing or digitalizing, experiences or processes, we're trying to simplify them, but sometimes we leave something important out. Again, nobody should know, generally 99.999% of the time, this is not because somebody's trying to do something wrong. It's just because people are trying to move faster. It's new territory. So we have to be really observant and thoughtful and back test and so on and so forth when we're automating. And all this leads to the importance of having risk in the room. But actually, the leader needs to be risk minded because it's not about the risk function turning up after the fact and saying, did you think of this? Did you think of that? It's not even necessarily risk in the room, the risk specialists in the room saying, we need to think about this, we need to think about that. It's about everybody in every room saying, did we think about this? Did we think about that? Have we got that boxed off? Because it's not a risk function to own the risk. That's always the user. Risk can be in the room, but they can't always be in the room, and they don't always have the answers. So it's about risk is everybody's job, and that kind of comes down to my last point around governance. The lack of seniors owning and then pushing down accountability, responsibility, etc. for risk. Like for me is a worry. I do observe this, and unfortunately, from time to time, we get called in to help organizations deal with it. I prefer not to have to do that. I prefer to be on the positive, on the growth side, rather than the trimming side of these kind of things. And then really working, but it's not even just from the inside, as I say, it's kind of coming back in as my kind of bottom bar says, like risk manifests itself in the external world, in service delivery, and how you manage yourself, your position on social media, how you think about end user readiness. Even the importance of ESG, because the more we use digital, the more we're using energy supply and the cloud, and we're all see that happening in that narrative happening out there in the world. We've seen it, a couple of years ago when everyone started to go, "Oh my God, Bitcoin mining is just explosive." That's entirely moved on. It's all about AI and cloud capacity and natural resources and so on. So, back to this idea that the digital leader is a good steward. They're a good steward in terms of risk management, and they're a good steward in terms of sustainability and resource management. And that includes the world around us as well. Final one I'm going to kind of cover off on the content side, and it's 8 o'clock. We're doing okay. Hopefully, you're doing okay. These are kind of again glibly call it my 9 point parable. So again, as I just look back on my experience to four, when people are trying to transform, for digital and AI, the risk of coding the past. So if we code the past, we don't make it simpler, therefore we don't utilize the full power of digital and AI. And that's a risk. But we also code the risk inherent. So when we're looking at digitalization and AI product development, we need to be very mindful of existing and new risks, I guess, is the point. So don't code imperfection, whether that be imperfection that already resided in if you're transforming it, or certainly don't code imperfection in terms of new developments. The lack of, a guiding light and a guiding vision for me, and as a risk perspective, and we would have covered this when we did our ambidextrous Saturday, the whole importance of, lining up and guiding an organization to move forward together as a transformation probability soother or as a way to make sure that an organization, so the narrative, the story, the momentum building, the motivation, that's really important because the promise is great, but the responsibility of getting there is even greater. And if you don't bring the humans on the journey, and they need to have a real clear destination, that should include being responsible and being stewards for the customer, for the organization, and for the market they're in. So risk management should be implicit. And as I've said, it's not risk job. It's not risk persons in the agile team and the scrum. It's not their responsibility. It's everybody's responsibility. So, that guiding light should include about being, a good steward. Breaking silos, I mean, again, from a transformation perspective, the stovepipe syndrome, this whole idea of, well, it's their job and it's his job or her job and so on and so forth. I mean, getting people to point in the same direction, that's it's easier to say, it's harder to do. And the importance of, getting people in rooms, working together, common ambitions, but understanding the common and the specific risks, really, really, really important. Capacity is a huge risk that I find most projects are just, carrying that all the time. James told us about that. Why do we talk about prioritization all the time? Usually prioritization is the means to equate capacity, as is eating the elephant. So breaking things down. That's why Agile has become so important. It's a way just to kind of, mitigate big bias, and move us into kind of, micro delivery. And as we talked about, the idea of reducing the change packets, the resources that go in and the expectations that come out, help us to reduce the potential risk from something going wrong in that packet, including identifying the learning so we can figure out the right time, what's the at the end, what's the right thing to do the next time. So risk really sits at the heart of agile as well. Constantly observing failure. Most of the stuff that we're trying to do with digital and AI is new. So then we constantly have to have a kind of a risk philosophy, have a greater risk kind of appetite, and therefore great risk management in order to utilize failure and really use it as feedback, and so it becomes the breakfast of champions. Again, I observe this in organizations that really are embracing digital and doing very well with it. They kind of are constantly observing what's working well, what's not working well, where's the risk, where's the opportunity, and in that kind of flywheel way. And they're very disciplined. They're just, they're killing distractions, because distraction leads to risk. So again, complexity and velocity. If you think about those two vectors, the more of both of those you take on, the greater the scale, and therefore the greater the risks. So really being smart in terms of distractions, really, really, Clark, really important. And then having open discussions, sharing, learning, looking at others. That's what I mean by close the circle by opening it up. I mean, take out bias, take out kind of, blinkering, and make sure that your projects, your teams, they reflect the market, they're tested, they're measured by inclusion, diversity, equity kind of lenses, and basically making sure that we don't limit by bias. Really important. And then just constantly measuring. I mean, how many digital efforts have been cosmetic in terms of they sound like a good idea, we think we should do them, but we don't really create the business case for why in the first place, and therefore we don't create the metrics to identify whether they are or aren't successful in delivering value. So they're my kind of 9 watch points, much more around execution of digital projects, transformation programs, AI developments, etc., etc. Probably have touched on most of them as we've gone through this program. So we're kind of at the end. I mean, I always love talking about the big ones. Another just really nice way to make it light before we move to kind of just a recap and any wrap points, particularly on the assignment. I guess sometimes it's just a nice way to get us to think differently about risk, because it can tend to be, quite technical and tend to be, very linear and so on and so forth. That's the black squid up the top, and they're the kind of risks that should have been predictable, but they weren't because we've got bias or because we don't have enough challenge in the room. It's called the black squid because a big power station. It was a nuclear power station in Japan. They funneled the warm water out into the sea. And what they just didn't think about by not being kind of open-minded and not having the right people in the conversation, e.g., if you're going to put something in the sea, you probably should have a marine biologist at least in a risk checkpoint with you. These black squids, they love the warm water, and they every black squid in whatever kilometer radius, within days, decided that these these pipes were their new home. And of course, you had an ecological breakdown and a very significant threat to this nuclear plant. It's just a nice way for us to frame as we're in the job of identifying what the risks could be so we can understand what they really mean from a strategy perspective so that we can measure them and we can mitigate them and we can accept the risk for the strategy we're pursuing. You kind of got to ask the smart question. So, what should have been predictable? The highly visible imminent risk, the white rhino, there's this thing about, when a rhino is charging at you, some people find it really hard to get out of the way, even though it's getting closer and closer. So it's this adage of, it's coming at you, financial crisis, et cetera, et cetera. It's there, we know it, but why is nobody doing anything about it? Sometimes there are risks that are highly visible, that they're imminent. Cycles are, cycles for a reason, they cycle around. Why aren't people getting ahead of those? And again, this is just about having the right philosophy and stance in the room to be a pain in the backside and ask the awkward questions. Because when you ask the awkward question, you get the right conversation going. And as I said to you, it's about having the right conversation in the organization of what could the risks be, what could the impact of those be, and how would we lessen those and be able to accept those in the pursuit of the strategy we're taking. The black swan is the rare and the unpredictable, so therefore it's very difficult to identify them. Was COVID one of those? Perhaps it was probably more a highly visible imminent risk because people have been talking for years that there was going to be a pandemic sooner rather than later. The ostrich is just a denial or flight from risk. You stick your head in the ground. You obviously don't do there, and that's why we do risk management. There's the grey elephant, very large and sometimes obvious problems that go ignored. So they're kind of, they're there and we all know they're there, and that can be a cultural thing. And then there's the white leopard risks, which are they're hidden, they're rare, they're hard to detect, and I mean they can just again I would go back and I'd just say cyber, because there's a high degree or somewhere between a low, medium. I have to be careful what I say, but somewhere between a low and a high degree that our organizations or even our personal digital environments are exposed somehow. And even it's worth going on the dark web and doing a little search for yourself. There are sites that'll help you do that to see if your credentials are exposed and for sale on the dark web. You know, there's a low, probably more to a medium and high probability that lots of us have got exposed somehow, and some of our credentials are for sale. So even that's worth going around about that. But they can be hidden, rare, hard to detect risks because they are manifested by folks who are unfortunately much more clever at the utilization of AI and who hack behaviorally and systematically the things we do. Point is, when you're having a risk conversation, just probe and push and try and ask the awkward questions because that's what helps us move out into things, into understanding. Okay, how am I doing, everybody? Everyone okay? Do a check-in. It's 2013, so it's time to bring it round to a wrap. Any questions out there for anybody? So look, I'm very conscious that's kind of a broader perspective on risk, but I'm trying to, risk always existed. It's just more of it, and a lot of it's newer, right? So we really need to think about how can we be risk champions, and by being risk champions, looking then through the lens of what we're trying to do with digital and AI, how can we be smarter? So look, just a little bit of recap. Last couple of weeks, we covered off the importance of designing our technologies so that they can be successful into the future. We talked about the supply demand. We talked about the importance of leadership with technology, and the importance of just the leadership flywheel. But we kind of went in on our last Saturday about, these DNAs, these values, this kind of core philosophy, the core strains of digital DNA. And we talked about the kind of operating system and being able to ask our organization as it's going about its work, does it really clear about its purpose? Does it know its authority? Does it have a handle on strategy, mastery, etc., etc. It's very hard to put risk in on its own box, folks, because risk sits everywhere. You know, and it's why it's not there, and it's why I use that slide just to, at the very end to bring that up. So behind, kind of our organization, behind the way we think, because that's the way we act, and behind every digital leader, we should be understanding what is the risk, what's the probability and impact, and how we're going to treat that on what risk are we therefore carrying after we've mitigated, and for the effort we're pursuing, are we happy to we're happy to carry that around on our briefcases. That's all you can do. Awareness, acknowledgement, mitigation, and constant vigilance. And in the same way that we're looking to perpetually change, we also need to be perpetually risk aware and risk managed. So that's kind of it on the material for this evening. That okay, everyone? Yeah, I'm doing okay. If there's any questions, just shout in. Simon two. Let's just do a quick recap. Not seeing anything there. So, again, shared these on the previous Saturday. But what I'm looking for you to do is take the 10 kind of building blocks, the first seven core capabilities, and then, technology, people, and risk, and assess where your organization is, where it needs to be in the context of the strategy you're pursuing, and then, sketch out what a transformation roadmap looks like. That's really what I'm asking you to do, somewhere between a 3 and a 5 year horizon. If you do 1 year, that's fine. If you do 10 years, that's fine. But rough guide, and maybe about 3 years is probably good, right? So this again is about, the seven core capabilities, then the kind of the three platforms as I've used them. So the full 10, do an evaluation. So that's going to look something like that, and that's all 10. So where are we? Where do you need to be in order to achieve your strategy, and why? And then that helps you to set out, right, here are the initiatives or the capability that we need to drive. Here's the capabilities that we need to build, or here's the risk management, techniques we need to put in place, or the actual risks we can manage. You can include that. Happy for you to do that. And it can be in that team map shape, it can be in that roadmap shape, and make it your own. I mean, no need to do, like, I've seen some of these and they've been tremendous, right? And when I say tremendous, like there could be 60 or 70 data points on it. If you do that, brilliant. I mean, you're really owning it then, right? But like, I'm okay for there to be kind of one, two, three, maybe no more than four, five, initiatives in each of the swim lanes, probably two or three. Important is that you start to interlink them. You kind of see the cross correlation. So when we did, I think we did this one a couple of weeks ago. If we didn't do this, and we did something similar, and we said it was kind of when we were doing our Ambert Extras Day, and said, well, this was the board. If you remember the Forest Lacks one, right? So this was an insurer who was like the board said we need a next gen proposition. This was an insurer who was going out of business very clearly, and they were asking themselves, why do we need a next gen? And probably answers the question, but it was probably too narrow of a scope. And we said, well, what would they do if they were building a next gen proposition? Well, they would do a voice of the customer. So who are next gen? What are they trying to achieve? Then we would say, well, we've got to simplify and create capacity in order to build a prototype. And then that prototype should follow some journey maps, and then you would launch that proposition at scale. Probably requires an API strategy, and the results might be to recruit 1,000 new U customers. I mean, it could be as simple as that. You're probably going to do something a little bit more complex than that, but just to remind yourselves, think of your strategy, think about what capabilities you need to build or initiatives you need to drive that will require digital and AI capability in order to execute that strategy and chart it out in something that looks like that or something that looks like that. Because that is all about, we don't want to give you work for work's sake. What we're trying to do in the learning exercise is to invite you to apply the learning into your own context because it's a much better chance of being persistent if we do that. So that's assignment two.
Sorry, Garvin, could I
Yes,
ask a question if you wouldn't mind?
of course.
Remember, I can't remember which webinar, whatever it was, you said that we do this for all of them, for all the 10. But I think I'm struggling a little bit with is because it's only 1,500 words and then, whatever number of slides, it's such an amount of data that is it okay to do it this for the 10, but then for the actual detailed roadmap, the more detail to focus just on some of them and not
Yeah.
all of them. So like six, say, or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I encourage you to think about all 10. I mean, if you black one out and say, well, we actually don't need to do that for this, that's fine.
No,
That-
I don't
yeah.
mean, I mean,
Okay.
show it on
Yeah.
this slide, but
Oh yeah.
then if you're putting more detail, like in a different slides, is it
Yeah.
okay to just
Yeah.
focus more
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
some of them as opposed to all 10? Because it's just so much data to fit into 1,500 words and the slides, if you know what I mean,
I do, Margaret. I
if you
do. I
do
do. I
all
do.
10.
I do. And I know, and we set you that challenge on purpose because we're trying to get you to think and output at an executive level. So I know it's a pain. But typically, I mean, the one thing that I was working on a big board deck to actually three different board decks prior to going away last week. And I mean, I had to bring each of those board decks through 4 or 5 simplification rounds where the chair was just saying, less, I need to see less, we need to see less, we need to see less. Now we'd thousands of slides in the background and we just show up with 10. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
so, so what we're trying to do is force that on you, Margaret. I know it's I know it's not pleasant. Because I go through it every week. But it's that idea of you do your homework and then synthesize. So show me your homework, and then the memo is all about synthesizing, if that makes sense.
Okay. Thank you.
Does that help?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Thanks. Great question. Thank you for that. Was Margaret, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, it was. Yeah. Great. Thanks, Margaret. Great. Super stuff. Okay. Anything else anybody wants to check in on before we go? Last chance. Have a look in. No, we're doing okay. Okay. Well, then look, we're gonna, if there is, just jump in as I go here, but a couple of things. Mind how you go.
Garvin, Christine
Yeah.
here. I
Hi,
put a
Christine.
note
Hey.
in the chat there. So we've got the 7 templates that we did for the last set of
Yeah.
capabilities. What would you recommend for the last three? Which templates or
Ah,
models would you
okay.
recommend that we bring
Okay.
into this?
Okay. So one of those, that's your risk one. Yeah. When I'm looking at culture, I usually say to people, look, evaluate the culture using the DNA, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Some people, say, well, I want to look at the system as well as the behavior. So the DNA is kind of more the behavior one. And some people then, if you want to also look at the system one, this is for me is a great way at the system. And again, you don't have to use all, isn't there, what is there? Is there 12 there? There's 12. You might just
Yeah.
pick three and say, I want to have a look at three of those because you might say, this is how I want individuals to behave or when they're together. This is what I want them to do, or this is what they're not doing. So that's your risk one. Probably that's your culture one. and that's your system one, if that makes sense. Sorry, that I didn't mention. That's why I did them in the recap, right? And typically this is the technology one that I encourage people to do. I mean, even if you just get to, the pass level is to kind of just look at the design principles and the success factors, getting to down to an architectural level of supply and demand. That's kind of not even honors, that's distinction level, if that makes sense. So that'd be the basic. That'd be the honors distinction. Forgive me, I'm going to sneeze. Oh, sounds like I'm going to cry. Phew. I'm hearing myself sounding like I'm crying and I'm sneezing. Sorry. So sorry, the culture one, that would be the basic one. And if you want to kind of go into a kind of a system on top of culture level, I'd go with that one as well. And that's just something that looks like that is what I would suggest you do on those. Does that help now? Sorry, I should
Yeah,
have been
that
clearer.
does it.
Yeah, sorry, Christine, I should have been clearer about that when I was going through them. Apologies.
That's
That's why I
perfect.
do
Thanks.
yeah, yeah, no, no, that's why I do the recaps. So maybe just say use these. So use those, please. Cool. Sorry if I missed something in the chat. Did I, Christine? You were saying something. You did, and I'm only just looking there. Sorry, Christine, I missed that. And thank you for jumping in. Good. Okay. So I was saying, mind how you go. And I mean, yeah, when I will issue the pack. There's a couple of more little reads, and again, they're kind of just personal messages. I do observe the world burning out. I went off and took a little break myself for a couple of days last week because it's been a busy Q1, and we've got a hectic run here in through August. So really important to manage your energy because and know to push back against the rage because it's coming at you with all this stuff, even with programs and after me telling you about an assignment. But do please, on a personal message, take time and care for yourself. As they say, reminded on the flight, put on your own as a digital leader, put on your own oxygen mask first before attending to anyone around you, kids or the elderly or otherwise. You got to look after yourself, because the more we're trying to achieve, the more we have to discharge as humans. And I observe lots of people giving more and more, and it's really important to say that as well. And just be resilient. And be empathetic to yourself by being empathetic when you're trying to drive change. I picked up this brilliant quote from Machiavelli. It's a long one. I'll let you read it there, but it basically says, in a roundabout way, and this is like 14th century stuff. When you're trying to introduce change, you will feel resistance in the system because the system will always try and protect itself. That's what our bodies do. That's why we have fevers and things like that. We're trying to kill the antibodies that are coming and attacking us. And that's what a system does. An organization is just it's a community of bodies and minds, right, who are going to try and protect itself when you try and introduce new stuff. So being really conscious of that and being really aware of that, it really helps your energy and so on and so forth. But it helps your soul and it's your resilience. I mean, my experience in driving, and I do it every day, is I try and help people to succumb change. And I use those words on purpose, succumb change, because they want to change, but succumbing it is the hard thing. Know you're doing it always for the right reasons, and that's about being a steward and being having your moral compass in the right place. Always trying to leave things better than you found them. That's my personal mission. In everything I do. If I don't do it, and sometimes it doesn't happen, and that's just either circumstantial or behavioral or whatever it is, stop and check and make sure it doesn't happen again, and loop back and try and resolve as best you can. But the more we try and do, and the more new it is, we be empathetic to those around you because when they're resisting, they're only doing the most natural thing in the world because we were built to resist. and built to protect. And the more we have, the more liberated we are, the more we're protective of what we have. So actually, change gets harder, by the more you have, and the more you introduce, etc., etc., etc. So it becomes quite binary. So look after yourselves and be empathetic to the world. And thank you for being with us and being with me on this journey. It's 2028, so I think we've done okay time-wise as we've been careening through this, and hopefully I've given you kind of enough to think about and enough to use afterwards. That it becomes valuable. And thank you all for any outreach that you've done. Always happy to pick up a conversation. But other than that, that's us wrapped in module 2. I will get a final chance to loop back to you again, which will be in the assignments 2. So I will be sharing that back with you, and some feedback. But it's probably the last live chance. So I want to say a big goodbye and a big thank you. It's been wonderful, and onwards and upwards.
Thanks, Garvin.
Thank you very much.
It's been really, really good.
And Garvin, thank you so much. Really appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Garvin.
Great.
Appreciate
Thank
it very
you,
much.
everybody. Yeah, super stuff.
God bless you.
Bye all.
Yeah.
Thanks, Garvin.
See you guys.
Everybody. Best luck in the next module. Should have said that as well. Yeah.
Garvin, can I ask you something?
Yeah, of course.
It's more like an advice, to be honest. Thank you so much. It was a very good module. I learned so much. But I think I'm one of the few ones that are not on the financial field.
Yeah.
I work for the Department of Water for the government, and I'm trying to be very, very creative.
Okay.
And my advice is on the assignment.
Yeah.
It is basically because I think if you understand what I was trying to do in assignment 1 was
Yeah,
just
I did. I
explain
remember it. Yeah.
the background.
Yeah.
Can I skip this a little bit for this? Because
Yeah.
I think now you know.
I do.
I
You're
do.
fine. Yeah. I'm really good with that. Renan, do please do that. And I know a little bit about Ishka Aaron, so
That's great.
yeah. So no, just get down to brass tacks.
Great. That's great. Thanks so much.
Not
And
at all.
I'll see you soon. Bye.